Hello, everyone, and welcome to Co-Creation Station, the podcast where we talk about the law of attraction, the art of allowing, spiritual magic, the mind-body-spirit connection, and how to best enjoy this mystical, miraculous, mysterious, crazy, sometimes confounding, but always incredible journey we call life. My name is Collin. I am a teacher, tarot oracle card reader, and I'm also a singer and guitarist in the band Red Treasure, and I'm located in beautiful, sunny North Hollywood, California.
My name is Stephanie Orlina, and I am a transformational life coach, and I help people shift away from negative thinking, and it transforms their lives. And I am in sunny San Diego, California.
We want to thank you for listening to the podcast. If you're listening to the audio version on Overcast or Castbox, Spotify, or whatever platform you're listening to, and thank you for watching us. If you're watching us on the Co-Creation Station YouTube channel, at this point, we're posting a brand new episode every morning. We want to thank you so much for liking us, following us, subscribing to us, reviewing us. All those things, they all help other people find the show here, and we're really grateful to you for that. If you're watching the YouTube version, you can feel free to leave us a comment. Love to hear from you. No matter how you're listening or watching us, listening to or watching us, you can email us at cocreationstation1111@gmail.com. Each week we start our discussion from a different jumping off point. And this week we are going to sort of pick up something that we started on last week's episode. I pulled a card from Colette Baron-Reid's Wisdom of the Hidden Realms Oracle card deck, and it was the Swan Queen, which for the YouTube viewers, I'll show you the card if you didn't see last week's episode. And for audio people who did not hear last week's episode, it's a picture of a beautiful woman with long white hair, a feathery dress, on a snowy landscape with snowy trees in the background and swans at her feet. And we want to focus on something. We talked about this card last week and led to a whole discussion, but there was another aspect of it that we want to talk about this week. So I'll read it real quick just one more time. The Swan Queen glides your way and asks that you look at your reflection in the events of your life. She gives you the ability to see beauty that has transformed your life from ignorance to wisdom. The Swan Queen lets you know that it's time to go within and seek the answers in your own intuition. Don't look outside yourself for answers right now. The true power lies reflected in the still waters within you. Now is the moment to meditate and ask for a vision. The power of psychic perception is inherent in you, and the Swan Queen will help you dive deep into your query to find the answers you seek. So we talked about a lot about last week, the end of this, which I didn't read just now, which was about time and allowing time for things to manifest, allowing you to desire things and put those things in your vortex, or have the universe put them in the vortex, and then allowing for the time for those things to flow out of your vortex into manifested physical reality. But Stephanie, towards the end of last week, you said you wanted to talk more about what the beginning of the reading talked about, which is trusting that you have the answers inside you, not necessarily listening to what other people think your journey should be or think you should be doing, but listening to your own inner guidance. Do I have that correct? Or?
I think so. And
Okay.
also not necessarily looking to others for your answers, like really trusting, or even just trusting our inner wisdom, our inner knowingness, like connecting to that. And I think that's like, it's been a journey for me. And I want to go, I can go back as far as learning how to meditate, because I always wanted to be someone who had a really strong intuition. And then I didn't know that these were related at the time, but I also wanted to be someone who meditated regularly. And I was telling a friend the other day that my journey with that, and that I finally in my 40s was like, Steph, if not now, when are you going to start meditating? And I began doing that regularly. And then from meditating regularly, I noticed my intuition got stronger. Like I would just kind of have a feeling about things. And so they went hand in hand, two things that I wanted. And I didn't know, like some people may go, oh, well, of course, if you meditate regularly, your intuition is going to get stronger. But I didn't realize that. And so going within to seek the answers of your own intuition, I think that's really powerful, because I was someone for a long time, and I still do this a little bit, or I'm looking to someone else to either validate me, confirm what I think I know, or to tell me, like, oh, yeah, of course that's going to happen, or of course. And what the reading is saying is like trusting that we all have an innate intuitive ability and that we can trust that.
Yeah, it's been really interesting. I think I shared with you. I've been doing this thing because there were some to-do list items in my life that were urgent that were not getting done because I was procrastinating them. And I had this idea with actually a mutual friend of ours in San Diego, who we both know, to meet for just 15 minutes a day. And my goal for myself with that was, while I was on Zoom with our friend, um, I was just going to do like the thing I had the most resistance to doing on my to-do list. And what I noticed right away was it was so easy to do it as long as I had like a person there to help me. Um, and then, but I got those like to-do list items done, and then it was very clear that my intuition was telling me, I feel like the universe or source or whoever, however you think about that, was telling me after a while, like, hey, Collin, you've been neglecting your band, Red Treasure, a bit lately. And you need to do, there are some things that you need to do. And it sort of felt like it was both an inner calling, kind of like it was like a phone call from my inner highest self, or however you want to talk about that. But it was also like how I would think about higher power. Like it's sort of, they were both sort of the same thing. And I think you talked about this really well in the last episode about how, yeah, that's part of the grand mystery, but, and so you can talk about it in different ways, but we have a part of us that is the spiritual, however you want to talk about it, the spiritual us, the higher self, whatever. And that higher self is really connected to the universe, like the big higher power, however you think about that. I love how Abraham keeps saying the power that creates worlds, the power that created all the planets and the sun and all the galaxies and everything. Like we have a part of us that's like not separate from that. It's like, even the word connected sort of sounds like, well, we have like a phone line, and it's like, I think the way Abraham talks about it is like, no, it's like you are that kind of like you're a piece of it. You're not just like connected to it with a cord.
We're an extension.
Yeah, you're an extension of it. Yeah. And so it's been really interesting because so now what I do is in those 15-minute Zoom co-working sessions I've been doing, like I quite often don't know what the next thing I should be doing is. And I let my inner voice slash intuition slash the voice of the universe sort of indicate to me what feels like the right thing to do. And it's been really interesting because a lot of times.
How do you do that? What do you do? Like what?
It's one of those things like.
Do you pray? What do you?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I started out because we say the Serenity Prayer at the beginning, which for people who don't know it is just, it's a very famous, it happens to be a Christian prayer, but I'm not specifically Christian. A lot of non-Christians use it as well, which is just, higher power of the universe, God, however you think about that, give me the serenity to accept the things I can't change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And so we say that together. And then what I had been saying for a few times is, and show me what to do. Thanks. Amen. I literally was doing that.
Oh, that's cute.
And I sort of half did it as a joke because it was awkward because I was like, I didn't know what I was going to do. But it's funny, just in doing that a few days, like when I did it, I knew what to do right afterwards. And so now it's more of just like being okay that I don't know, like just letting that be uncomfortable but okay. And then really just like going, I don't know how to describe it really. It's like going within and just sort of seeing what comes up. And it's like two different types of things seem to come up. One type of thing seems to be things that like, I would say my ego or other people or something like that is what I should do. And whenever I hear that word should in my mind, I always have a red flag on it because it's like, it's very rarely what I really need to
reflect
do or
on
what
it.
would be best
Yeah,
for me to do.
yeah.
But the other type of thing that comes up is like, what really feels like, does this feel like, as a human with a spiritual aspect to me, does this feel like the right thing for me to be doing?
Mhm.
And it's just asking myself, like, does that feel right? And just being like, yeah, it does. Okay.
Do you know what I love is that when you said just kind of seeing what's feeling, like you put your hands, you
Yeah.
crossed your hands and your arms, and you put them on your chest, as you
Sharon
said,
really
like
has, yeah.
feeling, and I just was like, wow, that was so cool to visually see as you were speaking what you were doing with your body. It just so,
Yeah.
it felt connected. It felt like you were honoring what you felt.
Yeah.
That was super cool to witness.
Yeah. Shout out to our guest from 2 weeks ago, Sharon. If you haven't
Yeah.
seen that episode, go see Sharon's episode where she talks about that. It was really cool. Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, it's one of these things where, I've mentioned to you before, like, I sort of come to this podcast sometimes as like, and I try to put myself in the position that I used to be in years ago, of someone who was skeptical, thought this was all BS, thought this was all woo woo, California weirdness people, which I now am, and just run it through that filter, just because I think that there are people who want to, like, suspect this stuff is true and want to believe it, but they were raised with a lot of beliefs that are like, oh, it's all BS, whatever it is.
Mhm.
And so at times like this, I wish I could describe the process like more scientifically, like more like, well, I do
For
this
those
in
people
my
who come
brain.
from more of a science than a,
Yeah,
what's
but
what
it's
are the
really,
two ways of describing it? One are science and one are more like a feeling, belief. What is that?
yeah,
What are the contrasting? So someone who comes from science and
I
then
don't know.
someone who comes from what would be the opposite of that?
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a good question.
I've seen it somewhere. I just can't
Yeah.
think of it right now.
I just think there's a lot of things about, when we talk about the law of attraction, the art of allowing. These are like, and it just sort of feels to me like, as humans, part of our human experience is we're not supposed to understand exactly all the mechanics of it. Like, behind the veil of the physical reality we see, like, we don't. I remember that episode in season 2 we did with my sister Kelly, Dr. Kelly, the chiropractor, about don't go into the universe's control room, because like, it's a nutty control room. There's so many controls, like, you couldn't possibly, um, you couldn't possibly run all the buttons, but B, you wouldn't know how any of the buttons did anything. So like,
Yeah.
just stay out
Or
of
even
there.
if you
Like,
knew like a couple, like, oh, I know
yeah,
that, but you don't know them
yeah,
all. And even if you knew them all, you don't know the behind the scenes of
yeah.
how they, yeah, that's a
I
great
can
one.
make it rain. This button makes it rain on this one Hawaiian island. That one I know.
And then not knowing
Everything.
like how it affects everything else.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
knowing like who wants
Yeah.
what and where and how, and knowing how all those intersect. Like you don't, yeah, it's just
It's
there's
funny because
so much involved.
my sister Kelly and I, when we were younger, we watched Doctor Who a lot, which was this science fiction show on the BBC. It's since made a huge comeback in the last 10 years or so, but and it's kind of funny because the time machine that Doctor Who, the main character on the show, travels in, he always talks about and it is this massive, complicated control panel, and he quite often has human, average human travelers that he's picked up that accompany him for a while, and there's this running gag through the whole show of like, where one of the travelers will say, well, can you get it to do whatever? And he's like, of course. And he pulls a lever, and he's got this look on his face like, I'm pretty sure that was the right one. And the Earth traveler's like, are you sure that's the right lever? And he's like, of course. This is my time machine. Of course I know how it works. And then he like looks at it like he's crossed his fingers.
Oh, that's
And
funny.
I think about that, it's like, yeah, if you're trying to travel through all space and time and control all the elements of that,
Yeah,
like, there's too much, like, you
yeah.
can't. But
Oh.
How did we get on that? We were talking about intuition.
Oh man, I know. I'm like, we wanted to keep this episode a little shorter because we're doing two in one day, and I'm like, did we?
Always feels.
Yeah. So, so what I was gonna say is, I think for me, it's been a journey of because I think when I was younger, I was always looking outside of myself. I didn't
Mm,
have a strong belief and
mm,
trust and knowingness, and and in the last few years, I've been trying to practice more of believe. Like I want to. I think I'd said to you before. I've said to friends for a long time, and I may have mentioned it on here a few years ago. I said I want to be the one. I want to be someone who's developed so much faith that I'm
mm.
simply unable to worry anymore.
Yeah. Rock on.
And
On.
I think on my journey the past 3 years or so, that's what I'm having an experience in my life right now where I'm getting to practice that muscle.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, Steph, you had asked, you wanted to develop like this opportunity, this experience, life experience you're going through right now is giving me an opportunity to develop that muscle.
Yeah.
And so it's not something that um, all my life experiences and all I've been through, currently I'm having this experience that I'm being given that opportunity to be someone who, and I think develops enough faith that I simply unable to worry anymore. And I think it's like what we were talking about earlier is like no one knows what I've been through in my life. Like I don't know
Mm,
everything you've been through and how you're feeling now and what you're wanting like to the T.
right.
I barely know that for myself,
Yeah.
but learning how to, and I think that's where the meditation for me comes in, because I get to get quiet and just have, have that connection with my higher self and God and whatever you want to call it, and know what that feels like, know what I really, and then just kind of try and seeing things happening in my life and going, oh, look, that's a little clue. Oh, look, there's
Mm,
another experience. And then instead of sharing it with someone else and going, but yeah, look, doesn't this seem like it's going to be this? And because they have a whole different experience of life and what they think and believe,
mm,
it may not line up with what I think it is. And learning how to trust my perception, my experience, higher power, everything. And it comes back to that. Like what was I didn't write it down specifically, but go within, seek the answers of your own intuition.
mm.
Psychic perception is innate within you, and learning to trust that.
It's interesting. I was doing some just taking notes this week, thinking about something because whenever people talk about like the voices in your mind,
Mm-hmm.
it feels like quite often they talk about a triad, three. And there's like different ones. And I was like making a list of like, why are there always three? But one of them is Sigmund Freud's concept of human psychology, which is the id, the ego, and the superego. Um, but then I've also heard like, like there's kind of, you have like an inner, like some people have like an inner rebel, an inner judge, and then like or I should say like an inner critic,
Mm-hmm.
or taskmaster or something, and then there's like a fair judge voice, in between or something like that. So there's always like these three things, and I feel like generally what they might be trying to talk about different things, but I think generally what I noticed when I was like making notes of like different people's, what are the three voices, that essentially there's a voice of, I don't know exactly how to label it overall, but it's like a voice of like, I want what I want now kind of voice.
Okay.
Then there's like a regular, like and that's an extreme. It's like I literally just want every desire I have that flows through me in any way. I just want it, met immediately. It's a very like, even like infant, kind of thinking. I'm just like, I'm hungry, so I'm going to cry until I get food right now. Um, then there's like kind of like an overcompensating extreme voice on the other side, which is like, no, don't do anything. Like, don't, you don't need anything. You don't need, like, stop, don't, kind of that. And then hopefully we have a voice in the middle that's like the arbiter of that, that's like, okay, wanting to get everything I want immediately is not reasonable. Not getting anything is not reasonable. What is the middle way? What is the healthy middle way? And I think that's sort of like when I think about it, because the challenge I was having before, like if I'm deciding like what I should do about the band today, the challenge I usually have is that I sort of hear two different voices. One of them is this, well, you should do this, and the other voice feels like a more true, gentle, loving, like, what would feel right is do this, And so for me, that right, true, the one that feels good, I feel like that feels like the middle one that a lot of people talk about in this 3-voice framework. It's like that my higher self, the one that's connected to the force that creates worlds or whatever, like knows the middle way, like knows the like the way that serves me the highest good for myself and everyone, and the extremes that are like get everything you want, don't get anything, like those are not going to get me where I really want to go. Because if I listen to the ego voice, which I think is more like, well, I guess in Freud's way it's the id, but is like gimme, 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 like that's only in my human part, like my spiritual self doesn't want to. I realized when I was a little kid, I had this weird experience. Like I had one grandmother she was a wonderful woman. I loved her to death. But she had this sort of like, I kind of realized at a certain point, like she would give me anything. Like she didn't have any boundaries to her generosity. And so it made me feel really creeped out as a kid that like, if I was a bad kid, I could ask her for like a limousine or something, and she couldn't afford it, and she would go she'd borrow the money, she'd do it, like if I could convince her that I really wanted it, like she wanted to please me so badly by being a nice grandmother that she would harm herself to help me. And I was like, ugh, like that, it shouldn't, like people should have, I would, even as a young kid, I was like that. And my grandmother is a wonderful woman and says many wonderful qualities. I don't mean to throw her under the bus in this conversation, but it was like, even as a little kid, I was like, oh, we need boundaries as humans, and my true voice, that higher self voice acknowledges boundaries, like if I just listen to that, like you should do this, it's like, well, you should stay up until 2 a.m. doing Facebook posts and Instagram posts and update the YouTube channel and, practice your new song and write lyrics for this other one that you wrote the music for last week and all this sort of stuff. And like, there's no boundaries on that voice, And I think my true voice is connected to higher power. And it's like, well, what would be the thing that is doable, feels right, is gentle, and has boundaries around it too,
Yeah, there were a couple of voices there that I thought of. That one is like the higher self, and then one is like the inner being, is like always wants my highest good, loves me unconditionally, knows the path of least resistance, wants me to take good care of myself. And so that voice always feels like, oh, and then there's the inner parent who was like, yeah, I know you want that, but right now we need to do this, or you can have that, but let's do this first.
Yeah.
To really, I always think of the inner parent as being very loving. That's the inner parent's job is to be like loving, but also has boundaries, kind of like what you were talking about. And then the inner child wants to play, or sometimes is irritated and whiny because it needs a nap or needs food or whatever. So there was like several different voices here that I was hearing that was the loving part of you.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the frameworks that I don't remember who had come up with it, but it was like there's an inner child voice, an inner overly strict parent voice, and then a like moderate or healthy parent voice, which was in the middle, you know, and like the overly strict parent voice would always say no. The inner child voice would always want what it wants immediately. And the healthy inner parent or the moderate inner parent could balance, like, you know what, you've been really good today and you do deserve a treat, you know, or, but, oh, actually, now you don't need that thing. What you really need is a nap. So we're going to bed, you know, you know, that gentle thing. How does that relate to, so we're talking about, you know, trusting that inner voice. Oh, the thing I wanted to chat about just really quickly is when we listen to that inner voice, the thing that's, I think, throws a lot of people off, because I used to watch a lot of videos on YouTube about productivity, and they talk about goals and planning all the time. And I think you and I did a really good episode in season 1 about goals, and like goals can be really helpful, but there is also this trap in our culture if you're not careful. Because if goals and planning convince you that everything is you're doing it by yourself with no help from the universe, like just your human self, you're probably not going to be successful. Because doing anything in this life that's really meaningful usually takes some of the magic of the universe to make it happen. And a lot of times when I listen to my true inner voice, it'll tell me to do something, and my logical self is like, dude, that's not gonna, like Abraham's talked about, like sometimes the best way to get more money is to go to the beach, which makes no logical sense. It's like
counterintuitive, as I say.
But the deal there is the universe knows best. The universe has this infinite wisdom that you can't possibly have in just your human mind. You have access to it through your spiritual self, but your human mind is not able to grasp all the complexities. So like, just trust that going to the beach is the right thing. You don't have to figure out why or how. Like, the universe just knows somehow if you go to the beach and have a good time today, the money you need will show up next week. You know, if you try to sit down and go, well, I have to make a plan. I have a goal to make $10,000 by next week, and I have to have a plan, and here's the plan, and here are the steps, and blah, 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 blah. It's not bad or wrong if you can somehow create a plan and welcome higher power or the universe into that process, and just understand that, like, even with your plan, you're going to need some universe magic, you know. Okay, but what a lot of people, I think, get into is, I'm going to make this plan, and the plan is going to make the $10,000 appear next week. And it's like,
For some people that works, right?
Does it? That's what I wonder.
I think it does. There are some people who have done the plan, stick to it, believe it, and trust it, and do the actions, and it works. And then there's others who it doesn't.
One story that I think about a lot that I've read about, because I've read a lot about Kurt Cobain and the band Nirvana back in the 90s, because I was a huge fan of them and still am, but he was, when he started the band, he was a very angry person. Most people acknowledge that knew him then. And he was determined that they were going to get, his band was going to get signed to a label. And so he made demo tapes, cassette tapes back from the day, and he sent them to like his favorite indie, you know, rock labels, you know, like Touch and Go in Minneapolis and these others. And they all either rejected him or didn't get back to him. And some of them, he sent the same tape multiple times, because he sent it and he waited a few weeks and he didn't hear anything. And he sent it again, and he had like an angry letter with the second one, you know, like, why aren't you listening to it?
Oh, that's super attractive.
Right? But here's the thing. Pretty much at the end of that process, they got signed. They were just doing a show in Seattle. A guy they didn't even know was going to be there was just starting Sub Pop Records, or had just recently started it, which, you know, became this huge mega success. But at the time, no one knew about it, pretty much. They're just starting out and wanted to sign them. Like, he saw this show and he was like, these guys are amazing, I want to sign them. And so he literally just walked up to them after the show and said, you know, I'm so-and-so, I'm with Sub Pop Records, I'd like to sign you. So the interesting thing to me about that is, because the reason I bring that story up is because you say You said, well, that work, creating the plan and just like hammering the plan works for some people, doesn't it? And I'm like, I feel like, because that's what Kurt Cobain did. He had the plan about the cassette tapes. And he was angry that the results he wanted didn't come from his plan. But yet I'm feeling like somewhere in him, he had to have like an allowance for some of the universe's magic, because otherwise it wouldn't have happened. Like if he was convinced that he could do it all himself and he kept getting rejected, he would have eventually just like not, right? Wouldn't he have quit and just
so this is like the whole, when you say magic, like that, this is because then there's other examples, other stories of people creating a plan, taking the action, sticking to it, and it happening. They make it happen. There are so many stories of that.
Meaning it happened the way that they thought it would.
Correct. I don't know of any specifically, because I'm not a very like create a plan. I'm that's more analytical, I think.
Yeah.
Some like we were talking about people who believe in science. I think those two probably go very much hand in hand. And that's not who I am. I'm more like right brain, spiritual, creative, intuitive, right. Where analytical and scientific are much more like plan, show me the proof. This is how it happens. And then, and those kind of people make things happen. Mm-hmm. They create it, they do it, they're action oriented, boom. Lots of people.
Like and again, this is part of the mystery. Like we don't know exactly what's going on behind the veil, but I would guess if somebody brought me an example like that, a specific example of like someone who wanted to form their own business, mm-hmm. and they had the plan for the business and the business hit all the targets, whatever.
Happens all the time.
What I would say though is, and I know skeptics are going to not buy this, but you can't really care about that. Because it's not the plan, it's still their vibration. What is going on is that they believe that their plan will get the results they desire.
Absolutely.
And so they're putting out this vibration to the universe, which is, I'm doing this plan and I'm totally convinced it's going to give me this thing. Right. Because there's also people, I'm sure we could find examples of both, right? We could find examples of people who'd done a plan and then got it, but people who done almost that exact, read the biography of that person, did the same plan, and it didn't work for them, and they'd say, well, that doesn't make any sense. I did the same things, and it's like, but your vibration, you didn't believe it would work for you.
Yeah.
And that's the weird part of that. And
then there would have been someone who read the same book, took the actions, and made it happen.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But they also would have had to have a vibration of the original person, of believing it. Yeah. So the part of the Kurt Cobain story I didn't tell you is that several people have mentioned that when Kurt Cobain was a little kid, there's sort of this famous part of his life story where he made this cassette tape for his aunt. Mm-hmm. And she kept it all these years later and still has it. And he's a rock star on this little tape. And he's talking to the crowd, and people say that they remember him walking around when he was very little, very young, completely convinced that he was going to be a big rock star. Yeah. Like before anybody told him like how it worked. Yeah. Like he had that little kid, like a lot of kids want to be astronauts because they heard about rockets and space and planets and they're just like, well, I want to be an astronaut if you can be. Yeah. And he was like that about being a rock star. And I sort of feel like this is completely my interpretation. But I feel like when I read the story of him getting angry about getting rejected and everything, I feel like I bet what happened vibrationally is that when he was a kid, he believed it so strongly in a positive way that he put it in his vortex back then.
Oh, totally. Yep. Yeah. Absolutely.
And he did something in his adult life that cracked the door open, but you know what I mean? Like it's interesting because I think a lot of people would say like, well, what he should have quit, you know, like if he got rejected over and over and over again. And it's like, well, that's the thing about the universe is it's like it's not tracking specifically you did this or you didn't do that.
Not at all.
It's tracking what have you vibrationally put in your vortex, and how is your vibration today? How good is it at letting stuff, good stuff, the stuff you want, out of your vortex and into your life?
Yeah. Yeah.
But,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when you say he put it in there as a little kid, I immediately went to, I'm realizing now that, my home is positioned on the canyon's edge, and
mm-hmm.
across the canyon is this beautiful lot. There's homes, but there's also lots of vegetation. And I think back like, oh my God, I put this experience into my vortex when I was a little girl because my grandmother lived on a canyon's edge. And across the canyon, there were just a couple of homes. There wasn't a lot of vegetation. And I obviously, and in her room, she had a small window that looked out to the canyon, but I couldn't see it from the bed. And I'd have to go over to the window and look out at the canyon. And I put all this stuff in my vortex back then because they were contrasting situations. Like, I wanted more vegetation. I wanted a little bit more homes. I wanted to be able to see the view from the bed because I lived with her for a certain amount of time. And so now when I'm in my bed, the French doors, I can see out into the canyon. When I see lots of vegetation and trees. So it blows my mind when I think about it. Like, oh my
Yeah.
God, I put that in. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. I'm just starting
Yeah.
to realize that now.
Yeah.
So, and I allowed it. I allowed for me to have this experience.
Well, I think, I don't know. Again, this is just my assessment of it, but like oftentimes when we're children, we haven't been programmed with all this. The world is hard. Money doesn't grow on trees. You know, blah, blah,
Yeah,
blah.
yeah, yeah.
And so we're more in touch with that true inner voice and our intuition than we tend to be. Like a lot of us as adults, like you and I, we're in an ongoing project, long-term project of reconnecting to our intuitive voice, you know, listening to it more often, trusting it more. But I think a lot of times as a kid, um, you know, like I just picture, you know, Kurt Cobain walking around telling people he's going to be a rock star. And the other thing about that is a lot of times when you're a little kid and you say stuff like that, the adults around you don't question it. Sometimes they do, but a lot of times it's like, well, he's a little kid, let him whatever.
Yeah.
And then if he still wants to do that when he's a teenager, we'll tell him how impossible it is and how hard he'd have to work and how the
Or
music
people
business
have parents who are like, yeah, believe it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, of course you can.
Yeah.
You know, all of that
Yeah.
has
Well,
an impact on us.
that goes to that sort of story that I tell a lot about Sammy Davis Jr. that still blows me away about like the adults in his life when he was a small child told him that the only way he could make money was to be a performer and a singer, and he didn't want to be that, but he was so convinced of it. He was
and
like,
usually it's the other way around, right?
It's so. I mean, that's just.
I didn't even know that story about him. I love that you told me that.
Have I never told it on here? I thought I told it on the podcast.
You did, but I mean, prior to that, I didn't know that. I hadn't heard about that.
Yeah, I mean, because our whole culture has this idea of like, oh, well, if you want to become like a school teacher or an engineer or something, that's easy, and becoming a singer is hard, and that's all. It like. I'm not questioning the fact that millions of people believe that, but it's still just a belief. And the Sammy Davis Jr. story shows you that it's not what millions of people believe. It's what you believe. Because he accidentally believed that he only could be a singer. Yeah. And he became like the most famous singer on the planet.
And it goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the podcast of like, it really doesn't matter what other people think, yet oftentimes you know, we think like you need to believe in me so I can believe in me, or what you think matters more than what and here you're saying like, it really comes back to, oh, I have to believe it. It's important for me to believe it.
Yeah.
And either way works, whatever gets you to where you want to go, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But I'm realizing like, oh, I need to believe in it. Oh, I need to trust those intuitive hits that I get, or those experiences that I have, that is like that little bread crumb in front of me going, see here, it's a little, it's a you know, they'd say you're on the highway and it says 255 miles to San Diego. It's like the signposts along the way that are,
Yeah.
you know, indicators to me, like I'm heading in the right direction, or what I want is coming, or what have you.
Yeah.
And then I need to believe, trust that.
Yeah, I heard oh man, I'm forgetting where I heard it, but or read it somewhere, and somebody says nobody quits running a marathon at the 26-mile marker. Like when they have 0.2 of a mile to go, everybody finishes.
Yeah.
Everybody
Yeah.
who quits
Yeah.
quits before the 26
Yeah,
mile
like
marker.
mile 18 or something.
Right. And it's
Yeah.
like, right. It's like, but that's the thing. It's like most of life is like the marathon before the 26
Right,
mile marker. It's
right,
like you just
yeah.
have to keep going and trust that if you keep putting one foot in front of the other,
Yeah.
you'll get to the
Yeah,
26 mile
yeah.
marker. But that is what's so funny. It's like the thought of quitting at that point is ridiculous to most people, but it's like, well, why would you quit at all? Like, you know, like I can make the argument like you're going to be the most tired at the 26 mile marker. In some ways, that makes the most sense to quit there. You know, like you got more energy at the 10 mile marker. Why would you quit there? You know, but it's really like that's so much of us are raised to like, well, we have to see it before we believe it. And, you know, Wayne Dyer, Abraham, The Secret, they all say this thing. It's like if you really want to get good at the art of allowing and letting the stuff you really want into your life more often, you got to go the other way. You got to believe it. And then you'll see it, you know, you've got to believe it first. It's challenging to get there, but yeah.
I think we can end with that. That was
Yeah,
beautiful.
that was good. Perfect. That was good. Stop. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening to us. If you listen to the audio version on your podcast platform, thank you so much for watching us. If you watched us here today on our YouTube channel, thank you also for liking us, subscribing to us, giving us a review, following us. We appreciate all of that. Feel free to leave us a comment on the YouTube video or email us at cocreationstation1111@gmail.com. If people want to find you, Stephanie, they can do so at
on the web, powerenjoy, POWERINJOY.com, and on social media, Instagram as well.
And you can always find me on Instagram at Collin_Daniels_Worster. Collin has 2 L's and Worster is WORSTER. Thanks again for listening or watching. We wish you a very happy, successful, and abundant week ahead, and we'll see you next time on Co-Creation Station. Bye, everybody.
Bye.